Hello, everybody. Welcome to this brand new episode of the Satisfied God podcast. Appreciate you being there, listening. Once again, sharing this with your friends and those you believe will be blessed by it. That's very encouraging to me to hear, and thanks for doing that. Also, at the beginning of this, again, as I often attempt to do, thank you so much for those of you who contribute financially to what we do here. It's a blessing, much more than you'd ever know, and much more than I can ever convey. Thank you so much for that. Your help is very important to being able to do this regularly. The load is kind of increasing somewhat because of other things that's coming, other groups that we're sharing with, and hopefully have the opportunity to continue to share with. So, having the time to really look at these things in depth and share with you, not just, memorized lines and concepts, but to get into places, because my direction right now, what I really sense to do and want to do is to go into places that I've never looked at, go into places that are, although familiar scripturally to me, unfamiliar as far as understanding them, or places that I've looked at one point in time with a particular concept or preconceived idea, and then we go through it again and bring some clarity, because some of these things I am finally having the Lord bring clarity to these things, and it's exciting, and I want to share it with you. So again, thank you for allowing me to do that by helping financially. If you would like to, and you're not yet financially supporting what we're doing here, would greatly appreciate it. There's a few ways to do that. The description in Podbean and the description on YouTube, and the description in each one of these episodes has the links. You could do it through PayPal. That's a way some people do it. You could become a patron on Podbean, or you can just do it the old-fashioned way and send a check or money order or whatever to P.O. Box 186, Marshall, Arkansas 72650, and you can make those out to the Satisfied God Ministries, or whatever, Satisfied God Podcast or Satisfied God Ministries, and you will receive a year-end notice based upon those contributions. So again, thanks for doing that. Today, I'm sharing with you a Zoom teaching that I've recently done, and this is, again, back in Psalms 119, and it's in, I think it's verses 30 and 33 through 40 or something like that. The thing that we have to understand, thing I want you to go into this session and all the ones in Psalms 19, and this is, again, another part of what I'm looking at, of understanding where we are as believers and the things that we read in the testimony, that we cannot automatically bring them over and make them applicable to the Christian experience. And that's very important when we're looking at these verses. There is a cry, there is a hunger. Remember, we've been looking at Matthew 5, those that hunger and thirst after righteousness. That's what this psalm is particularly about. It's one who loves the law, one who desires to perfectly adhere to the statutes of God and the ordinances and keep them unbroken. However, understanding the weakness and the impotence with which he approaches those sacred testimonial writings. And in this particular section of Psalms 119, There is a desire for God to show and make known to him the way of his statutes, so that he will keep them until the end. And we go into other verses, but that particular part struck me, and we spent some time on that during this session. And I want you to listen to it. I want you to consider it. Take it before the Lord. Again, this is not a believer saying, show me your law, and I will apply it as perfectly as I can. I'll do it to the best of my ability. This is not about your ability. In fact, the desperation out from which this psalmist is crying is not about enable me to do this better. It is a cry of the faith that looked unto the coming of the new covenant, that is crying to God, show me the end of this testimony. Show me where this journey of the law, the prophets, all of the testimonies that you have set in order, show me the path and lead me to the destination in view. We know the law had one destination. God's testimonies had one ultimate destination, and that was the person of the beloved Son. So we, as those in whom that Son dwells and abides and lives, are not now crying, God, show me the way of your statutes, and let me do them, or let me adhere to them, or keep them to the end. We are those who have come to their end, or we are those to whom the end of those things have come. So our cry is, let me see the one who is in us. Let us see the one who abides as the end of the law, as the righteousness of the law realized and completely fulfilled. But under this system, under the system of the law, this one is crying out again by the faith that looked forward unto the coming of the new covenant, the Messiah, and that whole age of fulfillment. It says, let me know, show me, cause me to understand the directional pathway and the road, the journey upon which your law is leading me, so that I will keep it until the end of that journey, which is the ultimate destination of your beloved Son. Let the law do in me, or to me, what it was intended by you to do, and that's to lead me to Christ. Thank God that we have come to the end of the law. We have come to the end of the statutes and the end of the road, or the path called the testimony, and are now beneficiaries of fullness, fulfillment, and spiritual substance. But we need to understand these things, because I think it gives us a greater appreciation for what we actually possess by the grace of God. So, I hope this is a blessing. Please listen to it. It may take you one or two, may take you more. But consider these verses. Consider the things that we talk about. We connect a few things here. So let's look at them together. And as we do, I pray that your eyes would be open, and that the Father would show and reveal in you the one of whom this beautiful testimony testifies. Amen. All right. We're going to be in, of course, Psalms 119 tonight, and we're going to start, I think, in verse 33. Send invitations to those two and see if maybe it helps. Again, we're going to start in verse 33 of Psalms 119. It says, Teach me, O Lord, the way of your statutes, and I will keep it to the end. There's Deshaun. Maybe this will work. And give me understanding that I may keep your law and observe it with my whole heart. I want to, there's Deshaun. Now I see you. All right, good. What I want to do is focus on these two verses for a little while, and then we'll move on. But there's a lot here. It doesn't maybe seem much when we read it on the surface, but I was struck here with the phrase, the way of your statutes. Teach me the way of your statutes, and I will keep it to the end. Mm-hmm. Now, most people will read that and they'll think, okay, I'm going to give my due diligence to keeping the word of God and doing what it says. But to me, this speaks of so much more than that. And I was, again, struck by the phrase, the way of your statutes. When you look the word way up, it doesn't just mean a means or a way like we talk about it. It actually means a road, a path, even a journey. And if you consider that terminology, I think it's a beautiful picture of the law, of the statutes, of the commandments, and what they were intended by God to do. The commandments, the ordinance of God that were implemented by God was a road, or let's say a divinely orchestrated journey to, as every road does, have an end, to bring you to a particular destination. Every journey has a particular destination, and so does this journey called the law, this road or this pathway called the law. And when you hear this psalmist say, teach me the way of your statutes, it's not just tell me what to do and I'll do it. It's I want to go beyond just these things, because again, we're talking about a man under the law, under an age of expectancy that is waiting for the culmination of the commandments and all to come. There are, according to Adam Clark, he'd say, I want to understand the spiritual reference of all your statutes, not just do them, as Jesus goes to the Pharisees and say, you search the scripture and you think in them you have eternal life. Why? Because they were reading it and applying it and doing it, but they were missing the whole point. And that's what this psalmist is actually wanting, to know the point. What's it about? Not just, it's different than just saying, teach me this and I'll do it. It's saying, I want to know the extent, the journey, the pathway that the law is carrying me on. And, this isn't just some man wanting to intellectually grasp the concept of the law. I think it speaks of a deeper sense of a longing for the soul's participation in the spiritual matter, the spiritual reality of which the law speaks and unto which the law as a pathway is meant to bring us and has brought us. If you read 1 Corinthians chapter 2, and I'll just reference this, but 1 Corinthians chapter 2, I think, says it in this way. Verse 12, now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God. Verse 13, which things also we speak, not in the words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Ghost teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. Mm-hmm. Now, some translations say, spiritual words and spiritual concepts and all of that. But what does this mean? That the Spirit of God compares spiritual things with spiritual. I think this is what the psalmist is after. He's desiring actually something that's only possible in the new covenant. It's the Spirit's job as the Spirit of truth to bring and take the spiritual things, the things of spiritual consequence, or the things that had a spiritual conclusion. Remember, Paul said, the law is spiritual, meaning the law had a spiritual end in view. The Spirit of God takes the spiritual things of that testimony and compares them or judges them in the light of that which is spiritual. That's what this means. Mm-hmm. He is taking spiritual things, priesthood, sacrifices, all of the holy days, festivals, and then he is bringing them to their conclusion in the spiritual realization of their testimony. That's what the Spirit of God does for us. That is what this psalmist is crying out for. Not just a way to understand it so I can do it. That's what we many times think, and that's what we try to do. We just try to implement things. In The Treasure of David by Spurgeon, he says this section of the psalm has a great sense of dependence and a consciousness of extreme need, which is all made up of prayers and pleas. The former 8 verses, that some of which we talked about last time, trembled with a sense of sin. Remember, he says that my soul is bound to the earth or the dust. He understood that there was that internal corruption, that internal bondage there. But this section is crying out, knowing a dependence that he has upon God to do something so that he can, as he says, keep it to the end. To understand the way, the road, so that I could stay on it until its end, until the journey is done, until this pathway comes to its destination. You can hear in saying those things, I'm hearing Paul say it very clearly. The law was a schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ. This is what he wants, to understand its conclusion, to understand its end. What is this? This is again, the Treasure of David. He said he would know the path of holiness, the road of holiness, which is hedged in by divine law, along which the commands of the Lord stand as a signpost of direction. But unto what direction? To what end does that road called the law actually point us? Well, there's one conclusion to it all. And this takes you back. Within this psalm, there's other references like Psalm 119, verse 105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Yeah. See, that should give us more of a concept and understanding of what he's saying, not just, I'm going to read the word and it's going to tell me whether I need to go shop today or not. You know? No, there's an illuminated path called the Word of God, called the commandments, and it's leading us to one singular destination. And if we stay upon that road and do not deviate from it, it will lead us to that conclusion. Psalms 119 verses 111 through 114 says, Thy testimonies have I taken as a heritage forever, for they are the rejoicing of my heart. I have inclined my heart to perform thy statutes always, even unto the end. That phrase has always got me, unto the end. And I hate vain thoughts, but thy law do I love. Thou art my hiding place and my shield, and I hope in thy word. My expectation is in thy word. So the commandment of God is seen here as a lamp that illuminates. It is basically an illuminated pathway unto life. This is what Proverbs chapter 6 says. You can write these references down. Proverbs 6:23, for the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. Now, according to Kiel and Delitzsch commentary, that last phrase, reproofs and instructions are the way of life, it actually should be corrected, the way to life. It is the way to life. The reproof and instruction of this commandment, of these laws, is the way to life, unto life. And this is something we need to see clearly. The commandments were given as, again, a path, a predetermined and predestinated journey with one destination, meaning one life of one man. That pathway is the only way unto one life. And that's its only hope. That's its only purpose, is that one life. Nothing else. Not a bunch of good people doing good things and acting good and being good and acting like Jesus and all that stuff. No, it's about just the soul allowing that particular law, that particular reality to come, for the soul to be brought unto God's intention, God's ultimate intention, God's ultimate aim. But look at these words for a minute. Reproofs of instruction. The word here, reproofs, means reproof, warning. It means chastening, check, correction, discipline. And it also means to restrain. To restrain. Now, when you hear words like reproof and correction, that conjures up a great deal of things when we read those words. But we have to understand again what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the commandments. We're dealing with the law of God. What was the correction, the rebuke, the check of the law? This is something we oftentimes do not consider, because many people look at the law and say, well, the law pointed its finger at man and said, you're bad. You're a bad person. That's what the law did. It just said how bad you were and how terrible we were and awful we were. And that's not what the law did at all. The reproof and correction of the law did not come because it pointed the finger at man and said, you're bad. The law of God was given to show how perfect Christ is, not how bad we are. Mm-hmm. It was a testimony and a picture of one man's perfection, not all men's corruption. Look, there's Lisa. Hey, Lisa. Let me see her. I'll look to see if you're on. Hold on just a second. All right. Let me see if, see you in here. There you are.
We're looking for.
I'll admit you. There you go. All right. All right. Lisa's coming on.
Hey.
There you go. Yes, there she is.
All right. So again, it was not a picture of man's corruption. It was a testimony of Christ's perfection. The reproof of that perfection was evident when placed against those who continually and perpetually fall short of the glory of God. But that was provided only to show how the need of man was even greater than man imagined. The need of man was greater than he ever thought. Man just thought he needed his habits changed or his attitude corrected, or some things I do need to be better. No. There's an entire source here called death, sin, and corruption that has to be changed. And the law pointed that out, not by pointing at you and showing you your ugliness, but by showing a beautiful picture of his beauty and his perfection, something you could never attain, not even close. Anyone who gave themselves zealously, and this is what this psalmist is all about, giving himself wholeheartedly, zealously, perpetually to the observation and love for the keeping of the law and the commandments, could never in them find satisfaction or find spiritual acquisition, because that was not the reason the law existed. So that's why the true intention of the law comes into play. not to make men like Christ, but to drive them in their total depravity and desperation, in their own corruptibility, to the one man who could perform in them what they could never, ever perform without him. It's not because their performance, this is not about their performance wanting or their zeal not being there. It was because there was something absent, and that was life. We've already talked about it. He was crying out throughout this first part of this psalm for life. Quicken me according to your word. So the law was to drive us or bring us as a journey, as a pathway into the arms of a perfect man who says to the soul that comes to him, I am come that you may have life in an abounding measure. And as John would say, because he that hath the Son hath the life. He would call out to that soul and say, come, and I'll give rest, because I'm the only one that can. Now, I want you to hear, because this is, again, these are the things that's in the mind of people when they read these things, because they're just reading it as they're reading these Psalms as a Christian having trouble, just like they do Romans 7. They read it like a Christian having trouble doing what God says to do, properly applying the scripture. So this again is from the Treasury of David, Spurgeon. He says this, the end of which David speaks, because he says, I will, if you'll give me this understanding of the way of your statutes, I will observe it to the end. We're going to talk about that. But here's what he says the end is. He says it speaks of the end of our life. He trusted in grace to make him faithful to the utmost, never drawing a line, saying to obedience, hitherto shall you go, but no further. The end of our keeping the law will come only when we cease to breathe. Mm-hmm. What a sad thought. No good man will think of marking a date and saying, that is enough. I may now relax my watch and live after the manner of man. You see, that misses the whole point. It misses the whole point. It says if we don't do this until we die physically, that means that we're trying to live like men, live like the world now. It's one or the other. No, this thing is not talking about, I'm going to observe this to the end of my days. What this is saying is, if you will show me the spiritual understanding or the spiritual meaning of your statutes and allow that road to bring me to their true end, I will observe it unto that end. I will allow the law to do what it was intended by you to do, and that's to bring me to its conclusion. Not, I'm going to do it as good as I can until I stop breathing. See? Because first of all, nobody could keep the law, period. Full stop. Second, the end of the law is Christ, so that righteousness could actually be internally the condition of all who believe, not righteousness is the result of doing it better next time. The word here for end means, and this is beautiful, he says, I will observe it to the end. If you show me the way, the path of your statutes. It means the result, the reward. It means the end, of course, and it means the compensation. That's a beautiful thought, isn't it? According to, just think about that. The compensation, the result, or the reward. Isn't that something when Paul would say, let no man beguile you of your reward? What is the reward? The reward he's talking about there in Colossians that he's saying, let no man beguile you of reward. That is the laurel wreath that they would put on the head of someone who had won a race in the games. If they had win, they'd have a crown, a reward. They'd call it's a laurel wreath. That's what he's referring to. Let no man take that wreath from you and say, it's not won yet. It's not over yet. The end hasn't come. You still have to apply these particular things to be of God, or be righteous, or be holy. Most Christians today, most preachers today will rip it right away from you and say, it's not done yet. Paul would say, you are complete in him, and they'll say, not so fast. But I love this. The Keelan-Delitzsch commentary of the Old Testament says this. And to me, this says it all. And to me, this is beautiful. I just had to sit and just look at this for some time. The word end used here by the psalmist is used in signification from the Latin ad extremum. Okay, it's from the Latin word ad extremum. Ad extremum is literally defined as at last, finally. Isn't that something? Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
I think here's the end of the matter, that I'm going to observe the law until its end. That's when I can finally say, at last, finally. What's that end? The tragic part is most Christians are still waiting for that moment where they can sigh in relief and say, finally, at last, he is here. At last, it's my work is done. At last, it's real. At last, it's true. And what the psalmist is saying, if you will show me the end in view, this roadway, what is the conclusion of it? I will follow that path until my soul can sigh in pure joy. At last, finally, I have arrived where I was intended to be. That's beautiful. That's what this is talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, you are here. At last, my hope has been fulfilled. At last, righteousness is real, and it didn't depend on me to make it real. Don't you want, I want the thought, just the thought of that moment where you can sigh a sigh of joy and great relief. That's rest. And just say, at last it has come.
But it was like this. I didn't touch it.
Finally, it's here. Finally, reality is dawned, and that is Christ in you. That is the moment at last it comes. That's what this psalmist is desiring. That's the reality we've come to. This is not talking about a bunch of Christians still having to be in this state of saying, will you please show me the end of this thing so I can do it better and do it to the end, to my fullest, until the day I die. Now, this is saying, as a man under the law, just like, again, Romans 7, Romans 8, what do you think Paul came to when he finally encountered the law of life himself that freed him from the law of sin and death? Do you not think he exhaled a great sigh of relief saying, at last, finally, everything that I'd hoped for is here, finally. And he preaches to the Jew and the Gentile to tell them, he has come, finally. The hope that you had, what you work in the temple day and night, trying to achieve and hoping will come, has come. No need to delay. God has not delayed anything. Words such as Jesus saying, I am come as the end of the law for righteousness. By the law, I am dead. This is Paul, again, this saying, at last, I am dead to the law. that I might live unto God. That Paul says he is a schoolmaster to lead, the law is a schoolmaster to lead us to Christ. And again, the law is spiritual. I'm the one that's carnal. That means the law had a conclusion in view. That was a spiritual conclusion. That's what he's desiring. Proverbs 6:23 again, reproofs and instructions are the way unto life. The word reproof, again, is the word restraint or correction. Now let's listen to these words of Jesus and let's see how these things apply or say the same thing. Jesus says in Matthew 7:14, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. What is he talking about? He's talking about the way. He's talking about this road. He's talking about the law and the prophets and the whole meaning of the age of testimony. And he's standing there saying, it is straight and the way is narrow, and few there be that find it. Few there be that find it. And we're going to talk about that. But the word narrow here means to crowd in, to restrict, to restrain, and to narrow. Few there be that find it on this narrow way means there are few who will find the true meaning of the way, of the law. There are few who will allow the law to bring it to its true conclusion, which is Christ himself. The path of destruction is men trying to be righteous on their own. That's destruction. Romans 7 is the path of destruction. Romans 8 is when you have entered the narrow way and have found the life that it leads you to. In fact, when you look at this word narrow in the this is from the Vine's expository dictionary. It says it this way, that in this particular section of Matthew 7, the word doesn't just mean narrow, like that's a narrow path. It actually means narrowed, like someone narrowed the path. It started here and it just kept narrowing. Someone has narrowed the path. Someone has narrowed the road to hem in, to bring it to one particular point. Narrowed is the way. What is that about? God used the testimony. It narrowed the way. The whole thing, it just kept narrowing down, narrowing down, narrowing down, until it finally came to this one who says, I am. There's the life that it's unto. There's the life this way is to bring us to. And few there be that will find that life, because the singleness of it is an offense. The singleness of it, the I am, is the offense to those who desire to have something of their own, desire to produce something of their own. It is narrowed by another party. It is narrow, rendered narrow by divine conditions, meaning God did this, which makes it impossible for any to enter who think the entrance depends upon their own self-merit, their own efforts. It leaves room for one. That's how narrow this is. And that is the whole pathway of the law leads us to that singular conclusion, the one. That's how narrow it got. I am. If any man will live, come unto me. If you will have the realities of the covenant, come to me. If you will have a relationship with the Father, I'm the only one that has it. Come to me. There's how narrow the path of the law really is, because it has one ultimate aim, one divinely orchestrated conclusion. And it has, by divine providence and prerogative, been narrowed so that only that one resides at the end. And that's the whole point of the law. And that's what the psalmist is saying. If you would just show me these statutes and their true meaning, if you would show me that this road has an end to it, that is not me, but something else, something more, something greater, I will follow it to its conclusion. And the conclusion is, I am. Remember what we said about the whole Psalm 119, the Alpha, the Omega, the Aleph, and the Tav? That's the answer to this. That's the end that he will observe it unto. And most, Paul will make very plainly, would not allow the law to bring them to the conclusion of the journey. Because narrow is the way that leadeth unto, and that means to bring unto a particular goal, to lead to an end. That's the word leadeth unto. 520 in the Strong. Now, let's go on here for a second. Psalms 119, let's go back to verse 34. Give me understanding, and I shall keep thy law. Yea, I shall observe it with my whole heart. Again, the language here, most people that just read it on the surface could say he's going to give every bit of energy he has to it. And that's what most people do. That's what Paul says about the Jews. They have a zeal, but they do not have knowledge. They have a zeal for God, but not according to the knowledge of God. And being without the knowledge of God, they go about not understanding God's righteousness, which is Christ and Christ alone. They go about to establish their own righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning it looks and reflects their own image. It looks just like them. That's the righteousness they're after. A righteousness that we can define in ourselves and not in another. That's not the end to which the law will bring us. But that is the end that many use the law to reach. But God's end was not that. So if you give me understanding, I shall keep your law, and I shall observe it with my whole heart. But you have to understand the phrase there, with my whole heart. I will keep your law, and I will observe it with my whole heart. There's something in that, because remember, we just previously in the last class talked about, I will observe it or keep your law when you enlarge my heart. Speaks of a heart now that is the dwelling place of God. Enlarge it to become the place of his habitation. That's how it's kept. That's how the law is observed perfectly, kept without breaking it, without breaching it. It's him. It's not I, but Christ liveth in me. That's the heart becoming enlarged, becoming the place of his dwelling, the place wherein his fullness resides. But you have to understand with this, my whole heart, there is a source to this that should cause us to give more consideration than we do sometimes. Observing with the whole heart is based upon an understanding given by God unto the keeping of the law. So to look at this a little closer, to me, to clarify it, it did to me anyway, hopefully it does to you. Jeremiah chapter 24 and verse 7. I will give them a heart to know that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. For they shall return to me with their whole heart. And most people push this off and say that's Israel, that's the Jews in the future.
One day all Israel will be saved. This is talking about that time in the future when all Israel will be saved. They'll return to God. No, because we're going to look at the wording here. It's used in many other places. I will give them a heart to know that I am the Lord. What's that heart? They shall be my people. I will be their God. And they shall return to me with their whole heart. Remember, so many times he would say, with their mouth, they honor me. With their lips, they serve me. But their heart is far from me. See, this is the heart he's talking about now, here in their returning, and the heart that he's going to give them to know him is a heart with the capacity to relate to him and to experience him. And here's this action. This is the part of it. This is the real extent. They shall be my people. I will be their God. They have returned to me with their whole heart. Now, remember Jesus saying, and again, this is, I think, in reference to Isaiah 29. Here, Matthew chapter 15, verse 8. This people, this is where Jesus says it, referring to Isaiah 29 when he says, the prophet says it. This people draw nigh to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. And he called the multitude and said unto them, hear and understand, not that which goes into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. Remember, this is when they came to Jesus and said, hey, your disciples don't wash their hands when they're eating, before they eat. What a big, that's really huge, isn't it? But that's how huge these small little things come, because to them that meant they were good and righteous and law observers. That was the way they saw that they were separate from sinners and they were holy and they were men of God. They washed their hands. They had added all of these things. So they come to Jesus and say, hey, they didn't wash their hands. Jesus says, okay, all of these external things that you love and trust in and find your righteousness in, they're nothing. You have concluded in my hearing right now what Isaiah said. With your mouth, you worship. With your lips, it's all surface and superficial. But your heart hasn't been touched yet. Your heart is not in a real condition of righteousness, so you substitute your external actions for it, for the lack of it. It's not that which goes in the mouth. And that's how most Christians think. It's what goes in the mouth that defiles a man. It's what comes out, because that's talking about the source. It proceeds out from the heart. There it is. It proceeds out from the heart. It's not about touch not, taste not, handle not, eat not, drink not. It's about the source. It's about the life that's in you, life or death. That's the defilement. There's the source of the defilement, or the undefiled. It's not about what you do. It's not external things. And I know that's hard to hear for some, but it's true. The distance of the heart leaves man's actions toward God merely superficial and ineffectual. Now, when he says, I will serve with my whole heart, to me, it seems more accurately to speak of the moment when the reality that is testified of, pointed toward, and ascribed by the law comes to actually touch the soul, comes to actually be the reality of the heart, becomes the indwelling, abiding reality within the soul. And I think when he's talking about giving them a heart, or him saying, I will do it with my whole heart, I believe this is the reality. Just like I said with the psalmist saying these things, and these are realities that will only be realized, or can or could at that time only be realized in the new covenant. Because this is when God's reality touches the inner parts of man. To me, this is the whole part about with my whole heart. Hebrews 8, verses 10 through 13. This is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts. To me, that is the moment when we can truly observe the law and serve him with our whole heart. That's when the heart actually has dwelling within it the only good thing that there is, and the only true righteousness that God will accept. The only good thing the law pointed to, when this covenant is written in your heart, that's the moment that the heart becomes a partaker of this reality that this psalmist is crying out for. When Christ comes to live in it. But notice what he says. I will put my laws into their hearts, or in their mind, and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. Does that sound familiar? That's what we just read in Jeremiah 24. I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return to me with their whole heart. Because it's not far after that with Jeremiah that he says these very words that I'm reading in Hebrews. This is in Jeremiah 31, he says the same thing. Speaking of the covenant that he will make with these people, write it in their minds, write it in their hearts, and be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. For all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. How is that possible? Because I have done it in them. You see, no preacher, no teacher can make you truly know the Lord. Nothing we say can do that. He's saying anyone in whom I dwell and write this covenant in their heart, they will know me. From the least to the greatest. It doesn't matter. There's no levels here. They shall all know me. Because I will write this in their heart. I will be the source of their understanding. I will be the object of their understanding. You don't need any man to do this. No man can do this. That's why Paul, many times when he would write his letters and he would declare to them the reality of a great salvation, he would then stop and pray for them that God would now give them the understanding. That God would now open their eyes. Because only God can. No man can do this. The true teacher has to do this. I will be merciful, verse 12, to their unrighteousness. And their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. What a great promise. But see, that's a great reality we now have. I will be merciful to their unrighteousness. He didn't say, I will work in them to make them where they'll never be unrighteous again. No, he's saying, I know they're unrighteous. I'll be merciful to their unrighteousness. I will override their inability with my sufficiency. That's what this covenant does. That's the whole reality of covenant if we don't understand it. A contract is two viable parties keeping their end of the bargain. That's a contract. I'm able to keep my end, you keep your end. One doesn't keep their end, they breach a contract. So it's two people that has the ability to keep their side of the thing. Now, covenant's different. A covenant is often one party who has all the power to do it, makes a covenant with someone who doesn't have the power to do it. That's what covenant's about.
No,
God made covenant with Abraham. What did he do? He walked through the pieces with himself, confirmed the whole thing, ratified it in himself, and then brought Abraham into it and said, I'll make this covenant with you. I've already done it. It's already good. Now I'm bringing you into a covenant that you have no power. You had no means. You had no ability to make it work. I've made it work. I've done it all. Now come to it. That's a covenant. It is God now writing his law in our heart. That's him living in us as the law of the Spirit of life, fulfilling righteousness in us where we couldn't. Same thing is said in Ezekiel 36. I will give you a new heart. I will put a new spirit within you, and I'll remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. And if you want to look up the heart of stone, the heart of flesh, I think it refers to the first covenant and the new covenant. Heart of stone, the stones, the commandments written on stones, and then the heart of flesh in which God himself can dwell in by his Spirit. He has given us a new heart. That's the reality of this covenant. But if you look, the word I will put, I will put my law in their hearts. It's the word bestow. It's the imputation. It's the giving of God and his mercy to those who have no power in themselves. That's what this psalmist is crying out for. He's showing his dependence upon God. Give me the understanding. Show me this, and I will follow this until you bring me to its conclusion. If you will give me understanding, bring me to its conclusion, I will serve you with my whole heart. Because then my heart will be full of the reality unto which this law is guiding and directing me and bringing me. I will put it in their inner parts, into their heart. I will give them a heart to truly know me. Let's read some more of this psalm. There's a couple of things here I wanted to point out. Make me to go in the path of thy commandments. Again, the road of your commandments. For therein do I delight. Incline my heart unto thy testimonies and not to covetousness. Isn't that beautiful? Incline my heart to the pure testimony of your law and not to covetousness. What is covetousness? It is trying to gain for myself what is not mine. To be covetous is to covet something that doesn't belong to you to make it yours. That is reading this law, just what Paul says in Romans 7, right? By the law. The law, let me go here just a second. Romans chapter 7. To me, this is how we can use the divine testimony that points to one man and be covetous of it. Sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, for without the law sin was dead. I was, verse 11. For sin, taking occasion by the commandment, deceived me, and by it slew me. What's the deception? Now notice, this wasn't God's doing. This was the sin that was in him, taking the commandment and deceiving him. It was a lust and a covetousness, seeing righteousness as what God was after, and sin in me says, you can do that. You can be that. Just give it your best, and you'll arrive. Finally, you'll arrive. No, the finally came when he arrived in your soul.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But sin took the occasion of the law, and it deceived him to believe that he was capable of reaching the conclusion the law pointed to. And that's why he said, the law is spiritual. I was foolish enough to believe that I could fulfill its demand, but the demand of the law is only met in one. And it's not me. It is Christ and Christ alone. That is the path unto which the law will always lead. And that is the conclusion of the journey. But he's saying, incline me to the truth of your testimonies. Don't let me fall back to my natural inclination, which is to say, I can be that. Remember what they said when God gave them the law in the first place? Everything that God says, we can do it. And just like that, they broke it. That's why after that, or before that, God had already done something, understanding that man was not capable of doing it. He had taken the book of the law and he had put blood on the law, or put blood on the tablets. And then he took the blood and he put it on the 12 stones, which represented the whole of Israel, because he understood, and he was showing them in that the only way you'll keep this law is if you are dead and another lives. The only way you can keep this law is through the blood, where it is not you, but another. Because the law never said, in fact, if you look at it in a literal translation, it's beautiful. The law never said, thou shalt not. It was actually a testimony of the beloved Son, not a testimony of the corruption of the people. It was a testimony of the perfect man, and it was God speaking to his beloved Son and saying, you cannot sin. You cannot commit adultery. You cannot. It's not even in you. And then he comes on the scene in Matthew 5, right, and says, I am fulfilling the law. Remember, you've read, thou shalt not commit adultery? I'm telling you, even the thought in the heart means you've already done it, because he's coming as the law in its absolute conclusion, where God says, you can't sin. And he's saying, I'm the one who can't. I'm the one who can't even, not just not do it. In me, the thought is not even present.
Oh,
That's a true, pure nature that he came to bring into our soul. We better be glad it's not about us. We have nothing to stand on if it is, but we have everything sure to stand on if it's not about us and completely about him. Incline my heart to your testimony and not to covetousness. Don't let the law be my means of righteousness. Let me follow it to the one who is your righteousness. Let me see it as a testimony of him and not instructions for me. You see that?
yes.
Most people use the word of God as instructions for them to live instead of a testimony of the living one.
That's right.
That's what he's saying here. Turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity. That's me. Vanity, emptiness. Because when God put man under the law, it says he subjected him to his own vanity. Stop me from looking at me to be the fulfillment of these words that testify of another. And let me in this way finally come to life. That's what he says. Quicken thou me in the way. Because that way is what? The way unto life. Let your way lead me to the life that is not vain, that is not empty. Establish thy word unto thy servant who is devoted to thy fear. Turn away my reproach which I fear, for thy judgments are good. Behold, I have longed after thy precepts. Quicken me in thy righteousness. What is the end? I will observe it unto the end. I will keep it to the end when you show me that this road leads to a particular conclusion, to a particular destination, I will observe it until its concluded end. What is the concluded end? Quicken me in thy righteousness, that he alone will live in me and be my righteousness. That's Romans 8, right? Verses 1 through 4. The law of life and the righteousness fulfilled because it's peace present. Now, we've just dealt with 33 through 40. That's the section here. And we'll stop there. But guys, I mean, this is the very thing. Even where he says this, make me to go thy path. Make me to go in the path of thy commandments. I mean, that's a presentation of how there is a necessity of divine action here. He has to make him go this way. The heart of man was not voluntarily brought under the law. It said it was subjected not voluntarily, but by him who subjected the same in hope. That's Romans 8. And the soul of man will not voluntarily walk to its determined destination. God has to orchestrate the journey. Make me.
Amen.
Make me. The heart of man, left to its own, will find treasure along the path. That's what they did, right? The Pharisees and all of them, they found treasure along the path, and they held to it and said, this is enough for me. This is good. I'm righteous. And the path still went on and led to one conclusion. They could have been deceived to believe that this was great and this is great. No, the end of the journey is the great thing. They got detoured. They'll get enraptured by things and remain in place with self-righteousness and all the other acquisitions they think they've made by the law. And this is why make me is the scriptural concept of what? God drawing us to himself. Right? None come to him unless he draw them.
Mm-hmm.
How does he draw? Through this word. He draws. He draws them. You know, the word draw is not like a real nice take him by the hand or, call out to him with loving words. The word is actually drag.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Unless he drags us, we can't come. He has to drag us down the road to get to the end. That's the grace of God here at work. So we'll stop there, guys, and go on in our next time together.